How are we doing today? Today we're going to watch Destiny debate Actual Justice Warrior. And realistically, I like both these guys. Just one's more to the right and one's more to the left. But realistically, they both make good solid points. It'll be funny to see how, when you watch them critically, for me at least, to see how this goes, because Actual Justice Warrior usually makes sense when it comes to the legal and that kind of nonsense. And Destiny usually does better with like social views. Sometimes I agree with them on taxes and stuff, but we'll see how this goes.
And Steven, the floor is all yours.
It is all yours.
Wait, real quick. You emailed us a list of a bunch of questions. What is our opening statement? What do you want it to be about? Just the general topic, or?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Maybe just like your top 3 reasons. Let's say your top 3 reasons.
Sure, we'll go. Do it.
Not top 2, just top
Do I
3.
have 30 minutes for this, or how long? Because Jesus. First of all, I would like to honor my debate partner, Sean, who has the unenviable position of defending the undefendable Donald Trump. So,
good luck.
I guess I'll focus on one area, although I imagine our talks will take us across a lot of different areas. When we're looking for who would be a better president for the next term, I think something that's important is to look for what are the things that the president can actually affect, and what are the records of both of these presidents so far on the things they can claim to affect. One of the areas that I'm going to fixate heavily on, because this is an area where the president can take point, is going to be, of course, foreign policy. Trump's foreign policy in almost every single regard was an unmitigated disaster. The photo opportunities that he had with North Korea, the lack of concessions that he gave from them, the discomfort of our allies in the region as a result from that, exiting us from the Iranian nuclear treaty that we are no longer allowed to re-enter, that we don't have any control over anymore, as Iran races towards nuclear weapons.
Yeah, we should have stayed in the Iran nuclear treaty, because we can't have them having nukes, because that's the worst spot for them, because we basically have Hamas, they got the Houthis, they got Hezbollah, they got everybody, and they don't give a fuck. They're Muslim as shit. They think they're doing jihadist work and shit like that, so you can't be doing that. It's a bad choice.
That we have completely lost all oversight on. The obscuring of the number of drone strikes that we're doing, as Trump has sought under his administration to make it harder to see how many drone strikes were actually happening, and the fact that these drone strikes were still probably increasing or remaining the same under his administration, though it's hard to tell. The abandoning of allied forces in northern Syria, the Kurdish people that we were working with to fight ISIS, that he basically abandoned to Turkish attack. The lack of any real agreement made with the Taliban, the fact that when he did those round of talks with the Taliban, the Afghanistani army was not present, the Afghanistan army was not present, the idea that he kicked the can on the road, or he kicked the can down the road on those talks until the next administration so he wouldn't have to deal with it.
Yeah, you can't be doing that either. I mean, it's kind of like what led to the whole Civil War, because of when you just kick the can down the road, nothing ever gets changed, and you just always hope for the next person, the next person, the next person. Well, then eventually it's going to lead to a fucking massive big issue instead of just dealing with it up front. And if you don't allow the fucking Afghanis and all these people allowed in during the treaties and shit, how do you expect them to have a peaceful transfer of power? You know? It just doesn't work that way. You need everybody who's going to be involved. You needed the Afghanis, you needed the Taliban, you needed everybody there to come up with one formal agreement that everybody could be on the same page and not just, one-sided issues, kind of what's happening with, the Israel and Palestine shit. You can't just have one-sided, fine. The other side's always going to find out and get pissed, which is what it is.
The fact that he says that he would be the one to solve the Ukrainian issue, despite the fact that he did literally nothing about Russian occupation in Crimea. The fact that he was constantly antagonistic towards both of our neighbors, Canada and Mexico, and our neighbors afar. Angela Merkel famously saying that Europe can no longer look to the United States for leadership around the world. The fact that Trump undermined NATO, questioned why we were even in it, made it sound like the most important part was just individual countries contributing some military budget to it. The fact that the parts of his foreign policy that were supposed to affect us economically sucked. The tariff agreements with China were a disaster. Everybody agrees at this point that it amounted to, I think it was like a $72 billion tax that Americans ended up paying, and it didn't even target China in the way that we wanted it to, as opposed to, say, the CHIPS Act that Biden did that actually centered a lot of new semiconductor manufacturing at home. I'm glad
we got the CHIPS Act, though, and make semiconductors here now.
Other things like crime,
it's a
domestic
big deal.
policy, and everything later, but I'll turn it over to Sean, see where he wants to go from there.
Come on, Sean.
Well, I'm glad you want to focus on what the president can actually impact, because as of right now, with split government and likely we're not going to have a president, at least for the full term, with both chambers of Congress, it really is down to what the president can impact. Now, it's interesting that you would lead with foreign policy, because one president that we're talking about actually had a guy that had to be stripped of security clearances due to the fact that he was loyal to Iran, which was uncovered in emails in a recent scandal. This, of course, is Rob Malley, and Rob Malley was only the head of our side of the negotiations for Iran, and it turns out he was recruited by the Iranians years ago and was advocating for them.
I have to look into this, because I'd never heard of this guy, Rob Malley. I guess we can look up Rob Malley scandal or something like that. FBI investigation. FBI is investigating whether the Biden administration Iran envoy Rob Malley moved classified information to the email where it may have fallen to foreign actors. Bring any charges against Malley. Yeah, he might have fucked up, but I guess technically they have no real concrete evidence so far. When was this done? When was this article written? Doesn't tell me a date. Up here it says 2024, so. But yeah, you don't want shit like that happening either, obviously. You don't want fucking people working with Iran and shit like that, giving up information.
So in that particular point, I'd rather have somebody rip up a deal than put in an agent for the other side as the person to negotiate a new deal. As far as what the president can impact, one of the big things that they can affect in our day-to-day lives is through the regulatory state. Now, Trump was actually the first real deregulator in American history. With just 20 regulations that he removed while he was president, just 20, the average American is estimated to have saved, in terms of income, $3,100. That's $3,100 in your pocket due to the fact that the Trump administration was using his executive power to pare down the regulatory state. This amounted to $220 billion in cost savings for consumers and for businesses. By contrast,
I mean, that is good. I mean, everybody loves having more fucking money in their pockets. Only thing I do know with like the Trump tax cuts and stuff like that, it's all up front, so it makes it look like you're doing really good up front for the first 3 to 5 years. I think it was till 2025. But then we lose that. But then the corporate tax cuts and all the tax cuts for the rich-ass motherfuckers, they get to keep theirs forever. It never ends. But we get a little tax cut up front. So, I mean, at least they're kind of nice about it this time.
our buddy Joe Biden has added $360 billion in new regulations, big ticket regulations, and compliance for this. Just the paperwork is 220 million hours. If you think that that is not impacting you economically, you got another thing coming. And speaking of...
I mean, that is true, but again, without regulations, though, you have fucking people doing shady shit a lot of times. So, I mean, I get both sides of the argument because too much regulation is never really a good fucking thing. But if you don't have any, well, then you have people fucking cutting corners and doing shady shit on the side. You can't have that either, so you got to find the fine line.
of economic impact, many of our major cities in this country have to deal with a migration crisis. Now, one of these candidates, even though the wall didn't get built, let's be honest, campaigned on building a wall. The other candidate campaigned on having asylum seekers rush to the border. Now, here's the problem.
That's the issue.
I'm in favor of asylum. Everybody should be in favor of asylum if people are in danger and all of that. We want to help people because we're kind and compassionate people. But the thing is, when you have migrants that know for a fact, and they're economic migrants, make no mistake about it, that they can go to a border agent, say the right words, and then be put into our asylum court system, that creates a giant backlog. It actually hurts our ability to help those who are legitimately seeking asylum, and this was encouraged by the Biden administration. By contrast, probably the best policy of any president related to immigration in the last 20 years, President Trump instituted a policy called Remain in Mexico. Now, the idea behind this was pretty straightforward. If you're saying I'm fleeing, let's say, Venezuela, due to the fact that I feel like I'm being persecuted or whatever, well, the route to from Venezuela to the United States goes through about 8 different countries. Now, if you're afraid you're going to be killed or persecuted or whatever the reasons for asylum, there is no reason why you shouldn't stop and apply for asylum in each and every one of these policies. Even though it's called Remain in Mexico, it just means apply for asylum in each country and then come to the United States after you're rejected. Because again, asylum is...
I mean, I'm down with that. I mean, they should be able to try to get asylum from anywhere else but here. If to start with, obviously, we're the biggest and best, so that's why everyone comes here or tries to. Plus, they all know that as long as you say you're an asylum seeker, they can't deny you. You are going to be let in for at least minimum 2 to 5 years before they can figure out the real issue is, which no one ever wants to talk about, is that you need to hire more judges and people like that to go through these cases so you don't have a backlog of 3 million, asylum seekers, and they're just waiting and waiting and waiting and milking the system like they always do.
It's supposed to be about safety, not economic opportunity. Of course, the Biden administration did not continue that policy. He encouraged people to flood to the border, and now we have about 7 million border crossings, according to the CBD data. A bunch of Republicans will tell you 8 million. You pick whichever number you want. It's not good, and we're suffering the consequences for that. Major cities in this country are having to pay to hotel these people, and what's Biden's response? He wants to fast-track work permits, give these people a faster magnet to further draw them into the United States of America and prolong the crisis. I think the number one thing that a president needs to do is advocate for the citizens of this country. These people are by definition not that.
This country,
and
America.
This is just one of the many reasons why Trump is a better candidate than Joe Biden. Also, Trump is alive. Joe Biden, we don't know. I've seen Weekend at Bernie's. I know you guys have seen it.
They're both old as fuck, man. We should have a cap at 70 years. If 35 is not is young age, then 70 should be the old age. We shouldn't have no fucking 80-year-old goddamn people running for goddamn president. It's ridiculous.
Destiny's drinking Red Bull to build up the energy to talk about Joe Biden. Well, I have water because I don't need any hype.
All right. We're going to kick it into an open discussion. So I'd like to put it over to the other side to respond to some of what you just heard and get us into it.
Yeah, I guess the most important determining factor for, Trump's future health is, how effective the U.S. healthcare system operates in federal prisons. I'm not entirely sure what that looks like, but I guess we'll find out soon enough. I'm going to be honest, I haven't even heard of the Rob Malley story with Iran. That might be one particular person. Is this a person that was appointed directly by Biden?
Yes, he was the person negotiating the new nuclear deal on behalf of America, even though he works for Iran. And by the way, there's other people that also have Iranian ties in that group.
Sure, maybe Iranian ties. Do these people rise to the level of Donald Trump when he was running for election, literally choosing people like Paul Manafort, who was working as an unregistered foreign agent in Ukraine, or people like Flynn who were lying to the FBI in regards to contacts that they had with people in Russia? Does it rise to...
Sorry, guys. I don't have commercials. Or I do.
to that level of making those types of personal choices? Do you think Biden is choosing those people in particular? Or?
I mean, first of all, Flynn was allowed to speak to the Russians. He was an incoming person who was going to be on national security. Manafort worked for the campaign. Should he have registered as a foreign agent? Sure, and he was prosecuted for that. But again, we're talking about the person negotiating with an enemy nation on this nuclear deal that you seem to want to praise. but he works for the Iranians.
So
And has
Flynn,
been stripped of all security clearances.
sure. So if Flynn was allowed to negotiate with the incoming, as an incoming part of the administration, I don't know why he lied to the FBI then about his conversations. Maybe you should talk to him about that.
I mean, it
'cause
could be a
apparently he seemed to
perjury
think-
trap. Who knows?
I mean, I don't think anybody made him lie if you actually read through any of the testimony related to that.
It's always funny that people talk shit in public and stuff, but once you get under perjury or going to jail, whatever, everyone's story seems to kind of change, and it's kind of just seems to not say exactly what they say. It's just always funny how that happens. So I mean, it makes sense that Flynn would say stuff in public, but then in the trials and shit, his story would change a little bit.
Do we think that, I'm curious, on a broad macro perspective, if we look at the approaches that the presidents have taken to foreign policy, do you think that Donald Trump was better at shoring up support for America internationally, or do you think Joe Biden has done a better job for that?
Well, there's two things. There's like, oh, are you well liked by like Angela Merkel and all these European leaders? And they're on the flip side, you have something like the Trump administration sending more weapons to the Ukrainians than the Biden administration, and the Biden administration not realizing that Vladimir to the way he viewed Obama during the Crimea annexation as somebody who wouldn't do anything, which likely is one of the factors that played into his decision to invade Ukraine. So, like, yeah, the Trump, obviously he talks like a goofball and all that, but he tends to appoint people to do the policies, and because he's not particularly interested in individual policies.
I will have to say that for Trump being supposed to be a businessman, always saying that he's going to get shit done and do whatever, he didn't really get much done. He got one actual bill signed. He got did a bunch of executive orders and shit like that. But even like in these big deals, he moved to Jerusalem. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem. I guess that was a big deal, but that kind of caused more fighting and stir up between the Palestinian and the Jews. And then, yeah, with the whole Afghanistan and all the Russia thing and Ukraine, like I said, it was going back to kicking the can down the road. When you kick the can down the road, nothing ever happens. It just wait for the big eruption at the end. And that's kind of what's happening now with all the warring and shit. Silly.
More interested in negotiating and like the whole process of being president, they tend to do a better job. Biden, on the other hand, is just not even awake.
If they thought that Trump would do a better job at negotiating these policies, why is it that almost every single person in his administration that talked about doing foreign policy ended up shit-talking him? I'm pretty sure Pence and the AG at the time had a lot of bad things to say about Trump in regards to North Korea, for instance. Do you think he handled North Korea appropriately?
I mean, what went wrong so much?
I don't think anything went wrong with North Korea.
The
They
fact that we
didn't do
validated
nothing.
him as a leader, we gave him photo opportunities, and we had talks with him without securing any sort of
Maybe you shouldn't have done all that, but I mean, it's not the biggest
issue.
issue. All the things in the world that could be a fucking problem.
I mean,
whatever that
The
was.
That
question
ain't much.
is as compared to what? So
As compared to not talking to him and continuing to, I guess, advertise on the world stage that until he's ready to come and have talks about cutting down their missiles program, cutting down their nuclear weapons program, until they're ready to have those talks, they're not going to be as validated as
I mean, but none of that worked for I don't know how many years since the Korean War with North Korea. Like we're on the third member of this freaking hereditary dynasty.
Sure, but I mean, now in the region, you've got Biden, who has better relations with Japan and South Korea, having talks about what to do with North Korea. When Donald Trump was in charge, we talked to Kimmy, we gave him some photos, and then we left.
I mean, the South Koreans wanted to do a joint Olympics under the Moon government when Trump was president. So, like, he was also, like, mirroring, to a certain extent, the policies of the Moon government at the time.
Okay, so then to be clear, you thought that Trump having photo opportunities and legitimizing Kim as a leader without actually securing any concessions, with them continuing to race towards a nuclear program and continuing to test
But they
missiles.
already have a nuclear program. See,
Yeah, but now they also have they
have
have U.S. approval for what they're doing. Essentially, now it seems like the U.S.
They don't
leader
have
was chill
actual
with it.
U.S.
All this
approval.
stuff
You're
doesn't
talking
have
about like
all
a
the camera
perception
fast
of
forward
U.S.
stuff.
Wow, that was it. There was no diplomatic plan there. All we did was enrage or anger our allies in the region. And you can say that, who cares, it's just a photo op. But he's the president of the United States.
Who was enraged by that? Again, the Moon government
I wouldn't
at the
say anyone's
time
enraged. Like I
was
said, it's no
very
big deal.
was
Sure.
leaked in
I
the
don't have
Trump
information about that story.
administration.
I don't think any of that story is true, but I guess
All right,
we'll
if you
find
say
out.
so. I mean, either he lost his security clearance or he didn't. Like, this isn't up for
Well,
debate.
you can lose your security clearance for a variety of reasons. You can lose a security clearance for not declaring that you're friends or in a relationship, for instance, with somebody from a foreign country. Or you could lose a security clearance for a whole host of different reasons that don't involve actual espionage of the United States.
Well, I didn't say, first of all, you brought up espionage. I didn't say he would be charged with espionage. Again, that came out of your mouth. I just told you what happened, and it's an ongoing developing story.
Okay. Well, I think that the ongoing developing story of somebody losing a security clearance that was involved in Iranian nuclear or some sort of Iranian negotiations, I don't think is quite as bad as Donald Trump exiting us from the nuclear Iranian deal that was allowing us to keep tabs on their nuclear program.
I mean, that deal was crap, and we had a very similar deal with the North Koreans, since you brought them up back in the 90s.
I don't know why that'd be a crap deal, because obviously you don't want North Korea or Iran to have any nuclear power at all like that, because you can't have fucking dictators do that shit. It's just stupid. It's a bad idea.
And obviously, that did not prevent them from developing a nuclear weapon.
I don't think we had a
I think
deal
it
with
just-
the North Koreans that allowed the United Nations into their nuclear facilities to do constant inspections
I don't know
to make sure.
I don't know the specifics of the North Korean deal, but like these kind of deals don't tend to work. You also had Ben
Wait,
Rhodes.
this deal was working. For Iran, it literally was working.
Yeah, it was working for Iran. That's the problem.
It was working for the whole world because we were preventing Iran from approaching a nuclear weapons program.
I totally disagree.
Okay, the UN disagrees with you, but okay,
I wish
that's
you'd
fine.
have some evidence
What
to
do
back
they
up
know?
saying
also,
I don't agree,
in terms of foreign
because
policy,
yeah, the
I
UN
mean, look
says
at
they
what
do,
is going
so
on in the Middle East right now.
what are you gonna believe?
Like President Orangeman, you could say whatever you want about him, but he made it pretty clear that Israel is our ally after, I don't know, 20 presidents. That's an exaggeration. After 4 presidents promised that they were going to recognize that Jerusalem was the capital of Israel, Trump actually did it. And then, weirdly enough, even though we were told by the media for years that making peace between Israel and Palestine was the key to working out recognition and all these things with the Arab world, it turns out that not doing that, standing firm with your ally, actually made that clear that that was off the table. And then we started to see recognition deals from these nations of Israel, our ally, during the Trump administration. And the wonder kid that everybody made fun of because he was put in charge of 25 million things, not my favorite person, Jared Kushner, actually did negotiate pretty well on behalf of our ally.
So I'm pretty sure Donald Trump moving the embassy to Jerusalem has been lauded as a catastrophic decision because he did it for literally no reason other than to antagonize.
yeah, we didn't get no like strategic gains out of doing that per se. So I mean, if you're gonna do it, besides just wanting to, you should have got something out of it, I suppose.
The Palestinians in the region, which, as we can see, hasn't
Wait,
moved as
can I
fast.
ask you a
them
question?
off.
Where is the capital of the United States of America?
D.C.
All right, and like who decides that? I'm just curious.
Sometime in the founding of our country. What do you mean? Who decides that?
The United States of America would decide where their own capital is, right?
Sure, yeah.
So, like, if Canada didn't recognize that our capital was D.C. and they said it was, you know, like,
Is Canada currently occupied territory
like
from the United
Cleveland or
States?
something? Like,
Sure.
would it be weird if all of our allies recognize what Canada said, or should they recognize?
Yeah, Israel and Palestine is a fucking tricky situation because of the occupation of Palestine, but I get Sean's point because obviously if I own my house, I should be able to dictate what happens and who goes and whatnot there. I shouldn't have my neighbors or anybody else telling me how to do and run my shit. So for Israel, if they really, really wanted Jerusalem being the fucking the capital of it, then I suppose they have the right to do that. But it is different because they're the occupiers of the Palestinian people, the Gaza Strip, and whatever the other place is called. Not the Golan Heights, but the other one.
Recognize what we declare our capital as, because Israel has declared their capital as Jerusalem. This was about recognition of your ally.
Yeah, does Canada
and like that
own-
seems like a basic thing that you should honor.
Does Canada own any part of Washington, D.C.?
I don't know. Does Palestine own anything? Is it even a country?
Okay. So the whole point of that is that it's
Never
contested
been a country,
territory.
technically.
That's why recognizing Jerusalem as the capital is probably not a good idea because who even owns
Who even owns it?
Are you having trouble trying to keep up with your professor? You've got to try Otter. Here's how it works.
Otter.
Jerusalem?
It's a great idea because if you're aligned with the country and they're telling you this is their capital, you can either recognize it like you would for a country that you're aligned with, or play this game where you're like, okay, we're all going to promise it and then not actually deliver on it. Do you think it's weird that Bill Clinton, George Herbert Walker Bush, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama all made this promise and never delivered?
No, because the whole point of the capital of Jerusalem and moving the embassy to Jerusalem is that Jerusalem is partially contested territory. That there's a huge issue about who actually owns which parts of Jerusalem that need to be resolved that the Trump administration didn't move us any closer to resolving before just smacking the embassy down in Jerusalem and saying, oh, look, we did a good thing. All it did was increase tensions in the area. It didn't help anything. It didn't do anything good.
That is true. The largest terrorist attack in Israeli history happened under the Trump administration. Oh, wait, that was last month under Biden.
What did Biden do to increase hostility between...
Well, we do have an intelligence base over there. Why did that fail?
I don't know what any of those things have to do. So part
I
of the
mean,
reason
so did
why the people in the Gaza
IDF's
Strip are
intelligence
so
fail too, I guess, if you want to go that
in
route.
Israel is
They're
partially
closer.
because of, you brought these up, the Abraham Accords. None of those bilateral peace agreements were impressive. They were already with countries that had relatively normal relationships with Israel for years.
Relatively.
They didn't involve any of the actual countries that have a lot of issues with Israel, such as Jordan, such as Syria, such as Iran. And the only thing it did was continue to antagonize relations between Israel and Palestine, because there were more peace treaties being signed in the Middle East without any explicit statement on what would be done with the contested territory.
Because it is a myth that this Israel-Palestine thing is the key to recognition for the state of Israel amongst these countries. Once you take that off the table and then you start negotiating with these other nations directly, you have all these places that are, you are right, they were working with Israel like kind of under the table while pretending that they still didn't recognize them, but getting at least a few of them to start the process of coming forward and recognizing the nation is progress. And that did happen.
Yeah, but it's progress in an area that doesn't matter, and it's making regressions in areas that do matter.
Why would that not matter? It's
It
like
doesn't
the
matter
broader,
because these
it's like the
countries were
broader
already,
Middle East.
Because these countries were already communicating with each other more or less, and now all it's done
And by the
is-
way, one of the foundations of this alliance is
Yeah, I feel like once you get rid of the Iran octopus arms with all the Houthis and all the shit like that, most of the countries are starting to warm up a lot more to Israel, like the UAE and all of them. They're starting to work with them, recognizing them, Egypt and shit like that. So, I mean, I feel like if we can somehow get rid of the Iran bullshit, we'd be a lot closer to actually having some stability in the Middle East.
the fact that Iran is a regional power that they're all trying to check
See?
in the area.
That's the
So again,
that's the
hostility towards
motherfucker.
Iran trying to isolate them as a strategy also ended up leading to this recognition.
I'm sorry, just to be clear, you're telling me Saudi Arabia needed a bilateral peace agreement with Israel to fight with Iran?
No, I'm saying that using their shared enemy rather than this conflict between Israel and Palestine.
The enemy of my
as the
enemy
entry
is
point
my
towards recognition
friend,
is a
is what
better
he's getting at.
strategy.
Yeah, but the conflict between Israel and Palestine is like one of the defining conflicts in the region. And Trump didn't move any closer towards that, and in a lot of ways hurt our ability to resolve it by aggressively acknowledging a capital and moving an embassy to a place in contested territory, and then in signing peace agreements without including the Palestinians in any of the talks. The same way
That's
that he
probably
signed
need
the
to
Doha agreement
invite
without
everybody to the
including
party
Afghanistan
if
government.
you're gonna
The same way that he agreed to pull out of
talk about
Syria
stuff.
without consulting any of the Kurdish people that were about to be mowed down by an invading Turkish force.
But why would, again, I need to negotiate with the Palestinians to talk about this alliance that you're building against Iran?
Because Israel-Palestine is like the contested territory in the
that
Middle East
is
that needs
a
to be
contested
solved.
territory. You realize that you can walk and chew gum at the same time. They could have this issue, this border issue that is over here, but the main issue is that these countries are all natural enemies of Iran, and you're trying to build alliance to counterbalance that.
No,
like,
you're
one
not.
has
Nobody
nothing to do
cares.
with the
We're
other.
not trying to build an alliance to counter Iran in the Middle East. That's just not.
What are you
We
talking
should,
about?
though.
Have you ever seen the map of like all the bases that we have surrounding Iran?
How
Like,
long have those
why
bases
are we,
existed? Since
why
the
are we
Cold
trying to?
War? Do you think
why
they're
are
gonna
we
fight
trying to?
against Iran? They're
Why
fighting
are we?
against the Soviet
I said
Union.
counterbalance. Why are we trying to negotiate a nuclear deal even under the Biden administration with Iran if we're not trying to keep them in check?
Because anti-nuclear proliferation is one of the stated goals of the entire world at the moment. So we try to discourage essentially everybody from approaching nuclear weapons.
So your position is that we're not trying to keep the Iranians in check as a foreign policy goal that transcends a bunch of different administrations.
My position is that
I
if we
would
wanted
say
to
so.
prevent Iran from approaching nuclear weapons, the best way to do that was through that joint plan of action,
I mean,
the
that's-
Iranian nuclear deal that Donald
That's a
Trump
nice
pulled us
way
out
of not
without
answering.
actually.
That's a nice way of not answering the question.
Yeah, we
After
need
saying
to
that
take
we're
care
not
of them,
trying
but
to
we also
limit
should have stated the
No, I don't
Iran
think we're trying to
nuclear
build a
deal.
coalition against
So I mean,
Iran
they're
in
both
this
kind of
case.
right in their own
What are you
different
talking
ways. They're
about? Of
just
course
trying to
we are.
argue
Trying
about
to
it.
have a check on Iranian expansion. Of course we are.
Where is Iran expanding to?
Well, right now they're expanding their influence into Iraq. Iraq.
Yeah, it's the influence, not
They do
Iran
deny
as
that,
country.
but they have a lot of
Iran
influence
and
in the new
Iraq
Iraqi
have been,
government.
Yeah, but the way to do that is to build military alliances?
Yes.
Okay, I disagree.
I mean,
and don't
wait,
think there's anything
wait,
to
hold on.
substantiate that. How does
let me
signing
just
agreements
ask
with-
you a question, right? Okay. So do you think, as a strategy, I don't know, against, let me just make up a country that might like want to aggress, as a strategy against like Russian aggression, that we could have an alliance like a North American like alliance, like something like NATO, and that would be a check against Russian expansion in the future if you just align those countries militarily?
NATO
Yeah, obviously. I mean, I don't know why Destiny just wouldn't bite the bullet in this, because obviously military alliances do check a lot of things. That's what we do with Russia. I mean, that's pretty much what we're trying to do with Iran. I think so, because obviously with the whole Iran nuclear agreement and shit like that, we all got to know who's kind of the evil bads of this world. We're just trying to hold them into their own, you know what I'm saying?
NATO was created to counter the second world, not one
The second
country.
world, like multiverse? Like, what do you mean?
In the Cold War, you have the first world, which are the
okay,
Western
yeah.
aligned powers, and you have the second world that are the Soviet aligned powers.
Sorry, I was watching
right?
a movie
so
before
the
this.
Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact is what NATO was created to serve as a
Yeah,
counterbalance.
but it still exists, and we still admit new members as a counterbalance towards Russian aggression. Because Russian expansion west predates the Soviet Union. It's the whole history of the nation. The reason we have that alliance there is, I mean, the original reason was keep Russia out and keep Germany down. Because we want to prevent conflict from breaking out on the European continent, because the last time that happened in a major way, well, the last two times were 2 world wars. So yeah, you do build.
I know a lot of people are not a fan of NATO, and I guess maybe at one point in my life probably wasn't either, but realistically, it's a good thing, because the more people you have on your side, the less likely other people are going to fight A, them, or B, us. And obviously, strength in numbers, man, makes a big difference. Whenever Russia, China, whoever wants to try to fuck with us, at least we know we got a bunch of fucking countries on our side, too, so it'll be nice.
The military alliances in specific regions to check an expanding power. Like, it seems like you're just arguing this to argue this.
I'm not arguing to argue it. You're trying to make it sound like these random bilateral peace agreements with countries that are already incredibly friendly towards us and pretty friendly towards Israel means
But they
anything.
never- they
Why
never-
not work towards moving to normalizing relationships with Iran instead of being intensely provocative towards them?
They never formally like recognized Israel. What are you talking about?
They
That
were
they're-
already communicating.
And
I've seen a lot of reports and stuff from the people there saying that the Iranian people don't even like their own government. They wish that we would just bomb them, or Israel or whatever, and get rid of the people running it so that a new regime could start over, because they don't like the wars and shit either, and not getting fed food and stuff like that. So they're bad, man. What can I say?
a bunch of these countries,
more or less ending
in
hostilities
a
towards
bunch
them.
of these countries, even though they're allies with us and they're allies and we're allies with Israel, if you have an Israeli passport in your Israeli passport stamp in your passport, you couldn't even go like to both countries. This is one of the reasons why with the State
Yeah, they got to
Department, you have to get
stop with
3
that
different passports
apartheid shit
sometimes if
too.
you're traveling
Israel,
between
that's
these
their
regions.
problem. They fuck up
But
too.
yeah, like of course, obviously.
I think if the goal is to reduce tensions in the region, then the goal should be the normalization of relationships with Iran. That has been like the key goal for foreign policy for probably the past 20 years, before or 20 or 30 years, before Bush identified Iran as the axis of evil. That was our goal. It was towards normalizing relationships with Iran. That was part of what the Iranian nuclear deal was for. It was,
Except.
Guys, if you can tie all of this into the Trump.
Okay.
sure.
Except the Iranian nuclear
Come on, man,
deal
tie this all
emboldened the
together.
Iranians, it put them into a position where their neighbors ended up fearing them, and that
Tie this
and
all together.
That ended up setting up the impetus for this potential alliance.
Okay. Yeah, I think that I guess we won't get into the Syrians or the Afghanistan conflict or anything like that. But yeah,
mean,
I
look,
think that
the
time and time
Afghanistan
again, I think that
the
time and time again, I think that Donald Trump pursued things that didn't matter. They gave him, I guess, photo ops. We got this. Every conservative touts this peace in the Middle East that didn't really happen at all.
I didn't say peace in the Middle East.
I didn't say you did. I said that a lot of Trumples and a lot of these people talk about peace in the Middle East or the historic importance of these peace agreements. They aren't. They aren't that really. Obviously, as we see today, they didn't get us any closer towards normalizing relations with the people that matter, like Iran, like Syria, like Lebanon, like figuring out.
That's
what's going
my
on in
people,
Palestine.
Lebanon,
Obviously, the
motherfuckers.
situation
Hezbollah.
in Afghanistan, him again kicking the can down the road so we wouldn't have to deal with that in his administration with the Taliban was deplorable. deplorable. Abandoning our Kurdish allies in Syria after they helped us eliminate ISIS, or at least in parts of Syria, and abandoning them to the Turkish army, that was deplorable. Not doing anything about Crimea and somehow pretending like he would have stopped.
The Crimea
Putin
happened in
from-
2014. Who was president? Was that Trump?
I'm sorry, did Russia pull all their troops out for the 4 years that Donald Trump was president?
No, but like that
So,
happened.
clearly that didn't matter.
That happened in 2014, and the Trump administration was heavily arming the Ukrainians. Like,
yeah,
more
it's been a
so
policy
than the Obama
to
administration.
it's been a policy to sell them weapons, but
Sell
Yeah,
them
he
all
ramped that
the
up,
weapons
even
you
though
got.
people were saying that he
well,
was
he ramped that up. He also
We
got
need
impeached for
more
threatening
money.
to take it away because they wouldn't do investigations on it.
Allegedly.
Well, he was impeached for it.
Listen, I heard that was a perfect phone call. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a fucked up phone
Yeah,
call.
I don't know what. So you're a crime guy. How do we do a law and order president who's facing like 4 different sets of indictments in the country?
Listen. All I'm going to say is that if you think that any other president, if they had these alleged crimes waged against them, would be prosecuted in the same way, I think you would definitely be lying. The fact of the matter is they're prosecuting him because he's the Orange Man, and that is the only reason.
Can you give me an example of which of the indictments are comparable to past crimes that you believe that presidents have committed that haven't been pursued?
I mean, you could prosecute. So one of the things that they used was a
I will say that I think some of it is the political bullshit where they're just going after him because he's an enemy of the Biden or whatever you want to call it. But part of it is you can't give him a reason to, man. You can't be fucking holding cases and cases and boxes of shit in your house after they tell you not to do it for a whole goddamn year. I just don't get why people think that's fine. I mean, or like how it's not his fault. He did it. You know, he shouldn't have done that. Paying off the stripper bitch or whatever. Just pay her off with your own goddamn money. Why'd you have to fucking pay with your campaign money? Just stupid things like that. Like, most of these things are not a big deal in sense, except that he did it the dumbest way he could fucking do it. There's so much smarter and better ways of doing the things he did, and that just makes no goddamn sense to me.
in Georgia, they try to use a RICO statute against
RICO.
President Trump. Now, you could have
Suave.
actually used that against all presidents. Ben Shapiro made this argument back in like 2010 as a way to deal with their administration as a group. But like nobody ever wanted to do that because presumably opening that can of worms on past administrations should set a precedent that you could do this to any successive administration.
I mean, they should.
But
If any president
President
fucks
Joe
around
Biden, even
before,
though he's
after,
asleep,
during, they should be
decided to
just
have
held
his
accountable as
Attorney
anybody
General,
else.
his
I don't know what
Justice
makes them think
Department
they're ahead of
break
it.
those norms anyway, and now it's considered a potential standard going forward that
Good,
when you leave
in a
office in the
sense.
United States of America, the next guy can come in and prosecute you. Even the Obama
wait,
administration
what are
didn't do
the-
that. Even the Obama administration didn't do that for the Bush administration. And by the way, the crimes that he was accused of were actually torture related.
And Bush probably should have been charged too, honestly, for torturing all those people on fucking Guantanamo Bay.
Rights without charges.
Enhanced
And Obama,
interrogation,
you
they
know,
called
you say
it.
what you want, and whether you agree or disagree with this, he seemed to set a precedent that the Trump administration actually followed when they were in office, which was we don't look backward, we look forward. But Biden's like, nah. Never mind, we're going to look backward for this particular guy,
So-
and
yeah, so
this is
firstly,
destructive to our entire process.
So firstly, there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever that the DOJ is working underneath Biden, or that Biden is ordering any of these investigations.
who appointed Merrick Garland?
There's no. Who appoints the chair of the Federal Reserve? You think Biden sets the interest rates?
Who appointed Merrick Garland?
Why do you think the appointment is what
The
determines
Federal
the
Reserve.
policy?
The Federal Reserve is a unique, like, institution.
Yeah, but if you want to go like that, Trump put in Bill Barr and all these people that told him that the election wasn't rigged and all that shit. But here we are, fucking 4 years later, we're still fucking bitching about how it was a rigged election and all this shit like that. So, I mean, don't be talking about who put in who, because everyone talks shit about their own selves.
Institution in the United States of America that does not directly serve under the executive branch, so this is why they're not analogous. The Department of Justice is something that is directly under the auspices of the president.
So when Barr was contradicting direct statements that Donald Trump made, was Barr working under the direct order of Donald Trump?
He was under the direct order of President Trump. I mean, one of the things that you could actually ding Trump for is that he didn't fire people enough. Like, for some reason, he wouldn't for some reason he wouldn't fire. It's true. Like a lot of these people just ended up quitting the administration. Like he didn't fire Anthony Fauci. He had every power to do so. He had every power to fire his own attorney general.
Gotcha. So just as a matter of
I always think it's funny that people always say that he's draining the swamp or whatever, right? Same as like Marjorie Taylor Greene. Why is it that you can be in the thing for 4 to 5 years, for her longer even, and you have no new information, no fucking juicy anything, just status quo, same as shit as always? So is it not as big of a conspiracy / whatever you think it is? Or are you just making money off it, obviously, or grifting, or whatever the fuck you want to call it? It's up to you.
like recent historical record, the DOJ does not work under command of the President of the United States.
Of course it does.
That is a fantastic claim. I'd be curious if you could point to investigations where the President of the United States ordered the DOJ to begin investigating.
The Unison MIDI Core Pack.
Unison's MIDI chord pack.
The Unison MIDI Core Pack.
If you don't know how to make chords,
Investigating enemies of the president.
A president can order the DOJ
We're
to
not
examine
asking the
it.
president. He could theoretically, he could make that, or he could theoretically, but to do so would be an unbelievable breach of norms, which unfortunately we became a bit accustomed to under Donald Trump. But the idea that the DOJ works at the behest as the personal prosecutorial body of the president to go after opponents of the president that's an insane claim. And Biden himself has made contradictory statements, as though Garland has made contradictory statements, saying as much that these things do not happen.
Yeah.
It does not happen. There was no communication.
This is like saying that if Pete Buttigieg over at Transportation says something that Biden disagrees with, that Pete Buttigieg is not working for the Biden administration. Sure, you can say specific things, and maybe the Trump administration as a whole believed in a greater separation between the DOJ and the administration proper. But it has been long precedent amongst especially Democratic administrations that there is a close relationship with their office and the DOJ. I mean, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was appointed as the AG under John F. Kennedy. Eric Holder was called Barack Obama's wingman. Barack Obama would speak about a particular case.
William Barr was called Donald Trump's sword and shield, and in the end, he was one of his harshest critics.
Now you're contradicting your point.
I'm not. My point is literally that the Attorney General and that the Department of Justice, especially in politically charged investigations, along with the rest of our intelligence community, is supposed to work with some level of separation. Otherwise, why would it have been a big deal for Donald Trump to pull in Comey and have conversations? Couldn't he just order the FBI to stop an investigation? Couldn't he just order the CIA, Christopher Wray, to not look into things?
Yeah, I mean, I will say, if he really did have the power that some people think he does, then this shit would already be happening. There'd already be fucking brown coats like fucking Germany just taking away fucking his opponents or whoever, whatever, you know? So that's kind of the point of the American system in general, is all the checks and balances. Obviously, you got the president, but you got the Congress, the House, all that shit, the judicial system. They all make sure that the other side's not fucking around too much. So, I don't know. But on that, I'm about to head out, I think. So, appreciate y'all. Have a good night. See y'all on the flip side.